So let's talk about a number you hear about all the time, gross domestic product, or GDP. But seriously, when you hear that number is in the trillions, does it actually mean anything for your day-to-day life? Well, today we're going to find out.
You know the drill, right? Every few months, the headlines are screaming about whether GDP is up or down. But these numbers they're just huge. They're abstract. Does a 2% change in a $26 trillion economy really make a difference for you and me? Let's dig in.
All right, first things first. Before we can talk about what it means, we have to be super clear on what GDP actually is. Let's break it down. Okay, so at its heart, GDP is actually pretty simple. Imagine you could put a price tag on everything. Every car built, every coffee sold, every surgery performed, inside a country for a whole year. You add all that up, that's GDP. It's basically the economy's final scorecard. So how in the world do economists calculate a number this huge? Well, it really boils down to adding up four big things. C is for consumption. That's all the stuff you and I buy. G is for government spending. I is for investment. Think businesses building new factories or buying equipment. And finally, NX is net exports. That's what we sell to other countries minus what we buy from them. That's the whole recipe. Now, this next part is absolutely crucial. You'll hear about two types of GDP, nominal and real. Nominal GDP can go up just because prices went up, inflation. It doesn't mean we actually made more stuff. Real GDP is the one that matters for the long haul. It's adjusted for inflation, so it tells us if the economy truly grew. It's the only way to make an honest comparison over time. And speaking of looking at things over time, let's do just that. We're going to use the United States as this incredible 160-year case study to see what all this GDP growth actually looks like in the real world. And trust me, the results are staggering. So let's rewind the clock. We're starting in 1860, right before the Civil War. The entire economic output of the whole country was just a little over $4 billion. I mean, think about that. It was a completely different world, mostly agricultural, pre-industrial. Okay, now let's jump forward 162 years. That $4 billion has exploded into $26 trillion. No, that's not a typo. It's an almost impossibly huge expansion. But again, that's just a number. What did it actually do for people's lives? And this is where it gets real. Here's the payoff. During that same time, the average American's real income, what their money could actually buy, shot up 13 times over. And get this, they did it while working way less. We're talking about annual hours on the job dropping by almost half. So what did all that GDP growth really mean? Simple, more money and a lot more free time. So when you have a whole population with more money in their pockets and more time on their hands, what happens? They start looking for ways to make life better. And this is where we see that big, abstract economic growth march right into the average home. I absolutely love this quote from economic historian Jeremy Greenwood. He called household technologies the engines of liberation. And that's just perfect, isn't it? These weren't just gadgets. They were machines that freed people, especially women, from countless hours of hard labor. But this didn't happen overnight, not even close. Look at how long it took for the absolute basics to become, well, basic. It took roughly 100 years for things we can't imagine living without, running water, electricity, a flush toilet, to finally become standard in almost every American home. But then something shifted. The pace of change just exploded. For this next wave of technology, things like the refrigerator, the TV, the computer, and of course, the mobile phone. The journey from being a rare luxury to something in every home took only about a single generation. That's what a productive, growing economy does. It gets better and faster at delivering progress. Okay, so we've established the economic pie got much bigger. But that always brings up a critical question. How was that pie sliced up? Did this incredible growth lift everyone up equally? To answer that, we have to look at the shape of the economy, not just its size. This next piece of data is just fascinating. It comes from some deep research by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and it gives us this incredible snapshot of what income distribution looked like way back in the late 1700s, comparing the American colonies to England and Wales. And what they found is, well, it's pretty surprising. It turns out that back then, colonial America was remarkably equal, economically speaking. In fact, compared to the really rigid class system back in Europe, it had one of the most even distributions of income anywhere on Earth. And we can put a hard number on that. This chart looks at the share of all the income that went to the middle 40% of people. That's a pretty good stand-in for the middle class. In colonial America, they took home almost 42% of the pie. In England and Wales, the same group got less than 28%. It just goes to show you that how wealth is distributed has been a huge part of the American story, right from the very beginning.
So, after this whole journey through history, what are the big lessons here? What can we take away from this and apply to the world today, especially for developing countries that are on their own journey to prosperity? I think the biggest lesson is this. While GDP is important, it's not the whole story. GDP asks, how big is the economy? But these other things we've been looking at, what we can call access indicators, they ask a much more important question. How are people's actual lives improving? It's all about the lived experience.
And this really leads to our main takeaway, especially for emerging economies today. The lesson from history is clear. Don't just chase a GDP number. You have to track how that growth is actually giving your people access to key goods and services. Because if GDP is going up, but people can't get clean water or a reliable phone signal, then it's just a meaningless number. And the exciting part is that modern technology allows countries to leapfrog. So, we'll end with a big question for you to think about. If we know that GDP by itself isn't the perfect measure of human progress, what should we be using instead? As we move forward in the 21st century, the real challenge is figuring out what our new scorecard for success should be. What really measures a good life? That's a question we all need to think about.